Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. He's talking to today's industry leaders and entrepreneurs about the people side of their business.
Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, and for the next 25 minutes, I'll be your host as we explore how to build your business through better hiring. Today on the program, David Klein is the CEO and co-founder of CommonBond based in New York City. CommonBond was founded in 2012, currently has 85 employees, and is backed by a who's who of venture funds, including Social Capital, Tribeca Venture Partners, August Capital, and others. We are so excited to have you on the program today. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here.
We are going to focus on the people side of CommonBond, and to set the stage for our listeners, give us 30 seconds on who you are and what you do.
Sure. So CommonBond is an education finance company. We lower the cost of student debt for those who graduated from college and university. We lower the cost of student debt for those currently in school. And we lower the cost of student debt for employees through a suite of student loan benefits that we provide through employers. Our mission really is to make finance more affordable, more transparent, and much easier to manage.
Well, what are a few of the ways, just to give our listeners some context, ways or products that you're doing that?
Sure. So I'll mention two things. The first is, what we became well known for, and that's our refinance product. So that is to say, if you went to college, university, and you needed to pay your way with student loans, just like I did when I went back to business school, then you are eligible to refinance your student debt upon graduation. And the reason people tend to like to refinance their student debt on the CommonBond platform is that we save people on average, about $24,000 when they refinance with us, in large part because of how we use data and technology to better underwrite folks and give them a fair shake on their interest rate. So that's the refinance side of the house. We also do the same thing for students in school. But the second piece that I wanted to mention up top here that might be interesting for your audience is something that we call our employer platform. So we've built an enterprise technology platform that has a suite of student loan benefits that employers like to offer their employees as a way to attract and retain top talent. So for example, one of those student loan benefits that we offer is something we call student loan contribution or student loan repayment. We've built technology that enables an employer to contribute, say, $100 a month to their employees, towards their employees' student loans. We kind of call this the 401k of student loans. It's relatively nascent. A lot of people are kind of clamoring for it on the employer side, certainly on the employee side. And it's something that we're very excited to be providing to the broader market through employers.
Pretty awesome. And I can imagine that the interest is pretty high, particularly from employers, on how to add that benefit. I mean, if folks want to learn more, where would they best do that?
Sure. Go to our website at commonbond.co. That's commonbond, one word, .co.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's dive right in. And I want to start off talking about the mission of your organization. I mean, I of course had student loan debt with my MBA. It sounds like the founders of the business, from what I read and researched online, you guys started the business having debt yourselves. I think everybody understands that it's pretty intense to try to pay certainly a graduate student loan off, if not undergraduate student loans. The mission's pretty noble. How does that mission to make life a little easier for people play into your ability to market your company as a great place to work?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it. And actually, in our case, I think we're uniquely positioned in that we have what I would call kind of a dual social mission. The first has to do with the very core of what we do, right? So we exist for no other reason than to save people money and make their lives easier, right? That is why we exist. So When I had to take out student loans to pay for my graduate education, and I realized that rates were too high and the process was too complex and the service was really poor, I knew I wanted to change that. And that's why we exist. In fact, we're the only company in the space, I like to say, that's a FUBU company, for us, by us. We're the only company in education finance that refinances, that provides student loans, that had the personal pain ourselves, and through that pain, as well as our backgrounds in finance and our entrepreneurial ambitions, did we start CommonBond. So that's number one. We exist to save people money and make their lives easier. Number two is something that internally we call our social promise. And this is something that's pretty unique in all of finance and all of education. We're the first and still only company to have a one-for-one social mission, whereby for every degree funded on our platform, we fund the education of a student in need. And we do that through a partnership we have with a group called Pencils of Promise, based here in New York, with a chain of over 400 schools globally. And that, in concert with what it is that we do every day, I think has been refreshing for a lot of folks in the workforce who are looking to work for companies whose values they share.
So how it's incredible, that social promise, which is very prominent on your website. How has that impacted the kind of talent you have opting in, saying, "Hey, I think I'd like to learn more about what you guys are doing"?
Yeah, I would say that if I looked at the floor today, probably 80% of the people who work here either heard about us and wanted to work here because of our social promise, or rather heard about us because of the social promise, or accepted our offer because of our social promise. And
Pretty incredible.
It's a pretty high number. It is remarkable. And when you meet the people who work here, they are equally remarkable people. I mean, these are people who are committed and caring and smart and hungry. The kinds of folks that you want around you, especially at this stage of business building, where you're looking to build out a company, a great company for the long term. I feel very fortunate with the types of folks that the team's able to attract to work here over time, and I do think that is at least in part driven by our social mission.
One of the things our listeners tell us they really love to hear is that inflection point and moment in the business where you went from co-founders and an idea to, wow, this is actually working and it's time to bring some outside people in. Wind the clock back for us and take us back to that moment that it was time to bring people in from outside that founding group. Just talk to us about the thought process there, and to what degree did you know what you needed and what you were building versus just trying to put some good utility players on the team and figure it out?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions in there. Let me start with what it was like to bring on the first couple people outside the founding team, and then we can kind of go from there. When I think about our first employee is a guy by the name of Nate. Nate, I had originally met about a year before we ever launched the pilot for our company. And the reason I met him is because I was going to business school at the time in Philadelphia. And there was something called the Drexel University Entrepreneurial Legal Clinic. Now, I was going to Penn at the time. I was going to Wharton Business School. I had applied to the Penn Entrepreneurial Legal Clinic and had been roundly rejected. So I applied to the Drexel Entrepreneurial Legal Clinic and was roundly rejected again. But because I kept pursuing both, and Drexel was the one that ultimately responded to my continued push for feedback, I was able to work with a group of second and third year lawyers at the time to put the very first formation documents of our company together. The third year law student at the time who was lead in that clinic was Nate. And as it would turn out, several months later, after our first summer as a business and between first and second year business school, we had done a number of things. We had posted on social media, hosted community events that we had put on, Nate saw those, and he had just reached out cold after several months of those formation documents and said, "Hey, I'm around. I noticed a lot of the activity on social media. Are you interested in some help?" And of course, as an early stage founder, when somebody is offering you help, you take it.
Heck yes.
And it just so happened that Nate's timing was impeccable, because the day after he reached out and I said yes, we had secured our very first outside investor term sheet. And so we were
That's
able
good timing.
It was fantastic timing. And he came to us not necessarily looking to get paid immediately. He was looking truly to help. And I feel grateful that we were able to pay him after he was on board helping us for about a month or so after we had closed our first round of outside capital.
It's that first employee hires is so fascinating to me because they have such an outsized impact on the early trajectory and really, frankly, whether or not it's going to work. And it sounds like Nate was the right person for that job. So the term sheet happened, and of course the funding closed. How did that change your mindset as an operator now that you've got this talent machine you needed to crank up so that you deployed capital wisely, but also quickly enough to meet the growth gates that you needed to meet?
Yeah. The mindset goes from, a couple folks who are working together every day, either, directly or virtually through technology, to now you have some capital, y'all get it together in one room, so to speak, or, our very first office. And by the way, our very first office was also the same place that I and my other operating co-founder, Mike, and Nate, our first employee, lived for over a year together, but also worked out of. It was at that point that we said, okay, with a little bit of money, not a ton, but with a little bit of money and with some runway, it's time to, as you mentioned, scale up with people and the right amount of people. And so we went out about hiring folks. We hired a product manager. We hired folks to focus on marketing and operations and customer service and credit risk. In our case, very important to the business. I'll be honest, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're a first time founder of particular scale. Why is it that somebody would work inside of a very small startup with just a handful of people when they have other options and opportunities in front of them? And add to that the fact that as an early stage company, you're not going to be able to pay a whole heck of a lot of money from a cash perspective relative to what somebody could find at a traditional place of employment. And so there has to be a very strong shared belief in what you're doing. From an altruistic perspective, just kind of from a day in, day out source of motivation perspective, as well as to believe that the stock that you have and the equity that you get in the company as an early stage employee will one day turn into something that is meaningful. And so, again, not easy thing to do. It really requires really strong shared belief in what it is that you're doing. And the rest, I guess, as they say, is history.
Currently, then, what informs your decision when it comes to whether or not someone sitting in front of you might be the right person for the job or not?
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is now it's a very different calculus. We'll get a few hundred resumes for each role that we have open. We've been able to develop a little bit of a name for ourselves, certainly in our space, and I think increasingly so in the talent market, in part because of the social mission that we have, as mentioned before. And so the way we think about bringing new talent on board, because culture is so important to us, because culture is ever changing, because culture is the result of human interaction, which is really complex and impossible to nail down at any given point in time. We're looking for certain qualities or themes of qualities that people have. So when I think about what a top performer looks like at CommonBond, it comes down to three things. One, they have a great attitude. Two, they demonstrate real ownership. That is to say, they exert great initiative. They're stepping up and into gaps, and they're filling those gaps either themselves or by bringing others together. And three, they deliver meaningful results. That is to say, if attitude and ownership was how someone went about doing their job, meaningful results was all about what someone was able to accomplish in their job. And if someone can accomplish meaningful results consistently over time on the what, and deliver that with a great attitude and having demonstrate real ownership on the how, that's a top performer. And so when we go through our recruiting process, we are looking for those qualities in somebody who comes on board to help us to get to where we're going.
David, you had mentioned earlier in our discussion this belief driven or mission driven or shared understanding or belief of what you're doing as an organization is important. Do core values play a role? Is there a documented belief system that you use to manage the business?
There is. We have 10 specific company values. We probably should reduce that. It's a lot to remember. But it runs the gamut between putting our customer first, to being kind, to working hard, playing hard, to having really high standards, holding people to it, and constantly getting better, to solidarity, and that we're all in this together, the roller coaster ride of building a company from scratch. I'd say those are the documented values or the themes of values that we have documented. I also think there are unspoken values that I think any company has, and certainly we do too. And I think the unspoken values have to do with why we exist as a company, what it is we do to positively affect the community around us, inside the office, outside the office at home, and outside the office abroad. And I think those are the kinds of things that signal to whether it's prospective hires or current team members, signals the kind of company we are, to give them a sense of, is this a place that I want to go into work every day? So for example, I talked to you about our 1-for-1 social mission. That's one thing. But we also have something every year called a CommonBond Social Impact Award. And that is to say that every year we go on a search for the country's top social entrepreneur. We believe our goal and our mission, in part on the social side, is to encourage, empower, and inspire other social entrepreneurs. That is to say, people who use for-profit principles and motives to drive social good. And we've it's a $10,000 award that we give out every year. We've done it for 4 straight years. We'll continue to do it. This last year, the team came to me and said, "Hey, David, there's a lot in the press about women in technology. Really, from the Trump election on, there's been a lot written in the headlines, and much of it is negative. And my team had come to me and said, "Hey, we're women in tech. We really like it here. We think this is a great opportunity. We think that with some more data and a productive storyline and narrative, we can make tech and finance a much more welcome place for women." And so the team put together the first Women in Tech Week, endorsed by Mayor de Blasio. We had many different corporate partners, including the NBA, ClassPass, the Muse, Betterment, a whole host of companies came to join us to really encourage, empower, and inspire women in technology and finance. And so we'll certainly continue to do these things over time. We'll likely continue to add to our suite of what I'll consider social impact-driven activity. And I do think that speaks volumes and signals to folks externally to come on board. And by the way, we don't do it to recruit great talent. We do it because that's who we are. And it just so happens that it speaks to a broad swath of folks who are in the job market.
Well, I can think of no better way to make those values truly authentic than to live them in that kind of a way. So hats off for putting values into practice and demonstrating what that looks like in the real world. I think it has a big impact when it's not just words on a page.
Absolutely.
Let's shift sides of the brain here and talk more operationally about how you actually manage this stuff. Let's start with your compensation philosophy. I mean, you think of the different components. It's either, base salary, upside, equity. You're going to learn more than you would somewhere else. I mean, talk about your general approach to what the value you deliver as an employer to people who work for your organization, and perhaps how that fits into your recruiting strategy.
Sure. I think from a pure monetary comp perspective, our approach is relatively simple and straightforward. And that is, we want to be fair relative to market, and we want to be consistent relative to other folks internally. And while that seems kind of simple, if we were able to, if a company was able to deliver on that 100% of the time, then we'd be in good shape. So fair to what's market for a particular role and experience set, consistent internally amongst employees. That's from a monetary comp perspective. And then I think there's non-monetary comp. So part of that non-monetary comp is what we've talked about already, which is, how does one feel about the company they're working for? Are they looking forward to coming into work every day? Do they feel as though they're affecting positive change in the world? Do they feel as though they are, they have responsibility to deliver real impact? We've talked about that already, and I think that's incredibly important. There's another piece of non-monetary comp, and that has to do with learning and development and recognition. It's very important to, again, a broad swath of folks to learn and develop. What I tell my company is, hey, look, CommonBond was built to be a professional playground for top performers, and I really mean that. And what that means is, I want to ensure that this place continues to be a place where people feel like they are learning, they are developing by doing their everyday job. That's really important to me, and I think it's really important to the folks that we bring on board. I also mentioned recognition. I think that can come in many different forms. I think that can come in, peer-to-peer shout-outs. I think that can come, at the team level, calling out individuals in teams. And I think it can come out at the company level. Whether I give a shout-out to an individual or a team at our Friday Lunch and Learn, where I'll spend 30 minutes to an hour in Q&A with the company, or over email after the product team releases notes after a big release, to call out certain individuals and certain teams that were really influential into getting something out that's going to move the business in a meaningful way. So I think there's the learning, development, and recognition piece of non-monetary comp as well.
Weight that for me, David. How important is the non-monetary recognition or the peer-to-peer uplift relative to overall satisfaction? If on the left end of the scale, it's, hey, a fair trade of time for money gets it done, versus we really have to lift each other up through daily acts of recognition. I mean, where does it fall in terms of your focus philosophically?
Yeah, so I actually think the non-monetary comp is just as important, if not more important, than the monetary comp. In fact, many times monetary comp is nothing more than a proxy to somebody about how appreciated they feel or how recognized they feel. And sometimes if people feel less recognized and less appreciated than they should, then I've seen this before. What can tend to happen is that they want even more money to compensate for that. And so I think our comp philosophy, as mentioned before, we want to be fair relative to what somebody could get in market for a similar job, and when we're able to kind of pay market for various roles, certainly now than we were when we were just starting out. And so I think as long as we do our job and meet that fairness threshold, fairness to market threshold, it really does come down to how well can we as a company, how well can we as leaders across the company show appreciation and give recognition to our people.
As we wrap up here our time, look back over the last 4 years and connect the dots for us. What would you sum up as perhaps the biggest lesson learned or thing now to be true that perhaps you didn't know before you started this incredible hyper growth journey?
Yeah. I don't know if this is something new that I learned, but it's certainly been validated and affirmed, 100 times over. And that is, in my opinion, the most important thing to a company at any stage vis-a-vis its long-term success is its people. And I know that might sound trite to say. And I remember, when I was an employee at large companies in corporate America before business school and before I started CommonBond, where I heard leaders say something similar. But having been in those shoes now, having started something from scratch, realizing what it takes to build a great company that lasts a long time, I have zero doubt in my mind that the quality of people we can bring on board and the quality of our culture to make great people even greater and retain those people over time is, in my opinion, the single most important predictor of long-term success at a company. So this is something I think a lot about. This is something that keeps me up at night. This is something that is always at the forefront of my mind. It's effectively people and capital, people and capital, people and capital. The things that, in my opinion, happen to be the existential cornerstones of what it means to build a great and lasting business. So that's what I would say to your question and how important I view people and the culture that they operate in.
Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen, in black and white, out there walking the walk. So, final couple of questions here. Is there a particular book that you're reading now that you would recommend to the audience that could, help inform their thinking on this topic or management in general? Something that you really liked or really has stuck with you?
Yeah, I'd say one of the books I've read in the last year that I'm glad I read was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I'd say that was a good one. In terms of a management book or kind of a people and culture oriented book, but there's actually a podcast that Reid Hoffman does, Masters of Scale, and he has one podcast where he interviews Reed Hastings, CEO, co-founder of Netflix. And Netflix is known to have a pretty incredible culture. In fact, they created what's called the Netflix culture document, 127 PowerPoint page document that Sheryl Sandberg called one of the most important documents to come out of Silicon Valley. In any event, that podcast, I think anyone who's serious about people and building culture as a way to build a sustainable company long term should listen to that podcast, if not also read all 127 PowerPoint pages of the Netflix culture document. Big fan.
Excellent recommendation. If you were to come back on this show a year from now and share with us whether or not you were able to successfully tackle the single biggest talent or people related issue or opportunity that you have in the business, what would you be telling us happened?
I would tell you that we were able to grow our employee count substantially and come out the other side a stronger organization because we had the right people, process, and governance in place to absorb that people growth in a way that turned growth very positive and productive. I think one of the things that goes maybe a little more underappreciated than it should is, we think a lot about growth and it stops there. We think that growth on its face is a good thing. Oh, you're growing your company by 50% or 100% employee count over the next 6 months or 12 months. That's fantastic. It is fantastic if you're able to pull it off well. And I think that's where the conversation ends. But frankly, that's where the really rich conversation comes. How do you pull off that kind of growth in that short period of time in such a way that allows you to maintain your culture, allows you to maintain the self-governing values that help people operate on a day-to-day basis. How do you think about the quality of people management throughout your organization? How do you think about people management skills improving over time? Because as a company and organization grows, so too does the complexity of what you need to do as a manager and leader of people. That to me is where the real conversation starts. And that to me is a sign of a great company, a company that can absorb 50 to 100% headcount growth over 6 to 12 month increments consistently over time. And so if we're here a year from now, then I'd be happy as a clam to be able to tell you we grew substantially over a relatively short period of time in a way that our organization was able to absorb and productively use as a platform to get to the next level of scale.
And that's the final word. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been learning from David Klein, CEO and co-founder of CommonBond. David, thank you. Super, super thoughtful and really deep experience share there for our listeners. I know they're going to get a lot out of having listened to you tell that story, and really appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Best Team Wins podcast. We're featuring entrepreneurs whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, author of the book, The Best Team Wins, which you can find online at www.thebestteamwins.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. You can find out more information about Adam and his book, The Best Team Wins, Building Your Business Through Predictive Hiring, at thebestteamwins.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.